Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning into Stronger Roots. Today we have Liv North. Am I pronouncing that right, Livy?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. She is a certified parallel parenting coach, a speaker, and a founder of Unfuck Your Coparenting, a platform dedicated to helping parents navigate high conflict co-parenting with clarity and strength, drawing from her own experience surviving a decade-long marriage to a covert narcissist. Libby plans practical strategy with empathy and coaching or to guide others through emotional and logistical landmines of parenting with a narcissistic ex. Her viral TikTok content and coaching work have helped countless parents find structure, sanity. That's great. Self-trust after years of manipulation. Liv's mission is simple to help survivors break free from reactivity, reclaim their voice, and model emotional safety for their children. So thank you so much for being a part of Stronger Roots and being on this podcast today.
No, I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, so we're going to dive in, and I just want to ask you, like, what was your own personal journey like to like where do you start, right?
I know it's such a long journey, and really and part of the reason that I really got into this was my journey was slow and painful and gradual. There wasn't a lot of like, oh my gosh, aha moments. It was really through it started in my marriage where I was trying everything in the world to try to make it right, trying to figure out what can we fix? Why am I not happy?
Yeah.
And I would go to couples counseling by myself because my ex hated couples counseling. And doing all of the growth and the work and just nothing stuck. And it actually wasn't until I happened to run into some content from Dr. Ramani, who is like huge in understanding narcissism, that I even started to be clued in to what this was. And I actually didn't find her content because I was thinking that was who I was married to. I did it because we actually have some narcissism in my family. My mom and my grandma cut ties, and I was trying to understand their relationship. And so I started reading about narcissism, listening to her videos, and she did one on covert narcissism. And I went, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
I'm married to this. Wow. And that was, a real turning point where then it was kind of a lot of self-doubt. No, I can't really be married to a narcissist. He's not really that bad. And then you would have those good days where they're kind of love bombing you and it just turns into a cycle. And it was just so much of trying to understand what I was going through. And I'm an avid reader and researcher. So when I kind of like got that term and could name it, I was on the internet. I was reading books. I was listening to podcasts. And while I was understanding all of this in theory, putting it into practice and like being able to say, like, yes, this is who I'm married to took years.
Hmm.
And so finally there was, this huge blow up with my family where he ended up being able to estrange me from my own mother. And over a year, where he kept promising he was going to, I'll reach out, I'll apologize. And, finally I just realized it's never going to happen. You're never going to change. This is called future faking. Oh my gosh.
Hmm.
Where I really had that, like, I gotta leave. Um, and that was just the first part. And I feel like for so many people, that's really where we focus. And you think that, okay, well now you've named it, you know what it is, you're leaving, lights on the other side. And I thought that too.
Hmm.
I was so fucking wrong.
Right.
um, I mean, for all of the terrible things he did to me during our marriage, it is nothing in comparison to what it was once he decided I needed to be discarded and was now public enemy number one. Um, And so going through the divorce process and starting to understand, okay, this is narcissism doesn't just exist in a relationship when you're married. It exists in post separation abuse. And again, it was like these just small little things where I would start to realize, oh, this is a something that is going to keep on happening.
Hmm.
Here's a pattern. And I mean, I ended up having a nervous breakdown in a courtroom where I fainted after a judge. I had filed a protective order, and the judge, because this is our legal system, didn't really understand, and I fainted. I've never fainted in my life, and just realizing like the amount of stress that I was under because I was still so afraid of this person who'd never hit me,
Hmm.
never physically abused me, but was absolutely positively torturing me inside.
Right.
Um, and through therapy, I had an amazing therapist during this time. Through my own reading, just really trying to piece together this is what it is. And so I finally come out the other side. I'm understanding that co-parenting is a lifelong war. It's you are going to be in the trenches dealing with this person every single day, and they are still going to be using all the bullshit tactics that they've used against you during your marriage, and they're going to be worse. And but also juxtaposing that with this amazing freedom and looking at who I was as a mom, being outside of that relationship and realizing, holy shit, like I was an amazing mom. Like I loved my kids. I was the primary parent. I would die for my children, but I was a better mom outside of it. And I got 50-50 custody. It killed my soul. But I was that 50% of the time, I was making a better impact on my children than I was when I was in the marriage with them every single day.
Hmm.
And really finding this like self-love and this ability to have confidence in myself and know my truth was my truth and I was not going to get gaslit anymore, and to be able to understand what it was that he was doing when he's barraging me with court orders and legal abuse and just financially draining the fuck out of me. Like I have never been so poor in my life as when
Yeah.
I was going through this divorce.
Well, and I
And
think that's part of what it is. I mean,
oh, 100.
when to rewind just a little bit is when you said, you left this marriage and it was like, you became public enemy number one. That is exactly what so many women say is that they become public enemy one. And the post-separation abuse is like something that you weren't even prepared for. You are now playing a game that you were never prepared for, that you didn't know even existed. And so now you're trying to say and reconcile in your brain, you're losing your marriage, right? So you're grieving that. You're grieving like your family dynamic, for whatever that was. Um, but you're also like now preparing for war that you're exhausted for. Like you're like, I don't even know the rule books to this. I don't know anything about what I'm getting myself into. And reconciling, like it's so amazing to me that like here's a person that you spent so much of your life with. We're talking having babies, having holidays, everyday dinners, whatever it is. And then you have to almost pivot and say, I don't like the man that I married is not the man that I'm divorcing, or the woman that I married is not the woman that I'm divorcing, right? It's like you don't even know this person anymore. So you have to really prepare yourself in a way that's something, like no one tells you what the game's like. Like, here you go. This is how you answer to this. And here's without being clobbered. Because you absolutely get annihilated because you no longer know who that person is. And I think that that's the biggest like cognitive dissonance, right? You have that in your brain. You're walking that fine line of this is going on, but yet this is who he's supposed to be or she's supposed to be. And those two don't line up. Something is off. And so your brain does haywire. I mean, you go through you said like a nervous breakdown, you collapse. There's nothing more than to like short out. Your brain shorts out. And you have a hard time coping with that reality and what your life looks like now, I think.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
every woman that I talk to, every man that I talk to that has been in a really toxic type relationship says the same thing happens to them. It's like this breakdown that happens, and um, so tell me more about like from, you get through, where you're starting all of this and you're trying to pick up the pieces of your life now. And how do you do that? Like, what's the first thing that you do once you discover that you're in this narcissistic relationship and your kids are in chaos and everything is broken and destruction. How do you pick up the pieces? What are you doing?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is realizing, and this is something that I say in all of my coaching sessions, you cannot change the other person. You
Mhm.
have to focus on yourself. And you cannot and I say co-parenting a lot, but it's really parallel parenting. But you cannot parent a child and coexist with this person if you have not done the inner work to heal yourself. And that is an ongoing thing. You don't graduate one day. But you have to realize there is a reason you got into this relationship in the first place and why you accepted this behavior. What was that? And how can we work to make sure that you don't see those behaviors as unacceptable or as acceptable in the future? And truly learning to trust yourself. I mean, we've all been gaslit the fuck out of
Mhm.
for years. And chances are if we've ended up in a relationship in a marriage with somebody who's narcissistic, we were probably getting it from beforehand. Like there's probably some history in your family. There is a reason that we think that this is okay.
And I just want to put a pause right there. So gaslighting is a relatively new term, right? So it's been around forever, right? But when I worked in domestic violence, probably, I don't know, how long it's been, it's almost 16, 17 years ago, we never used the word gaslighting. And so the term really refers to an old movie that where the guy and his wife were living, and he would totally turn up the gaslight just a little bit. And she would say, "Oh, the lights look bright." And he would say, "What are you talking about?" And then he would dim them very low. And she would go around and she said, "Gosh, it looks really dark in here. What's happening here?" And are you messing with the lights? And he would say, "No, are you okay? Are you going crazy?" And so then he would turn him up again. And it was this constant messing with her mind that made her doubt her own reality and her own experience. So how damaging gaslighting is for someone is like an understatement. Like even just that movie was from, I don't know, 1930 something or 1920. It was an old movie. But even back then, that was going on. But we really didn't use it in the terms of like domestic violence until most recently. Like now the term is pretty widely used, but it was funny, like just gaslighting. When you say gaslighting, it's like, oh, okay, what does that mean? What does that, but it's so damaging to your psyche. And I remember writing something down and then like like waiting, like everything had to be written down for me, and that way it didn't get misconstrued, from a phone call or something else that was being said. I had to make sure that, everything, you know, um, that, I could double check basically, because it's really kind of just damaging to your whole mental mindset. And I think that's where you really short out is because you have been gaslit so much.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was, a huge part of my journey too. And I think a lot of people's is, I started keeping and I had to hide it. I hid it in like some folder on my computer that I misnamed and put like funky pictures on the top But I did. I was basically keeping a diary with photos and timestamps
Yes.
to remind myself not only about facts that I was, not being, I was starting to doubt myself, but also just to remind myself that I was miserable most of the time.
Right.
Because a lot of times, and that was one of the things he was really great at, was going, oh, it's not that bad most of the time. We have bad days, but the majority of the relationship is
Hmm.
good. And that was so not true.
Right.
Um, and one of the things that I think is almost a benefit for somebody who ends up going through the divorce process is any lawyer worth their salt is going to be telling you to document, document, document. They're going to be telling you don't have phone calls, make everything written. And that also can be used as a key to help you be like, no, I'm going to go back and read that email. This is what I said,
Yeah.
this is, and so it is kind of nice because it does force you to do the documentation. And if you, kind of know that you need to just go back until you can rebuild that faith in yourself. And I think that's really what the goal is, when we're talking about like recovery from gaslight,
Hmm.
because you can't explain it to a judge. Judges, I mean, trying to articulate that the reason I'm leaving my relationship is because I've been mentally abused is something that just now, right now, today, does not hold up in court. It does, nobody, you cannot prove it.
Right.
Even, yeah. And I would say, like, even now, like, if people ask what went wrong in my marriage, I just, I just say he was paying for sex.
Mm.
Like, because that's something which was true. Um, People could totally get that. They're like, oh yeah, I would totally leave somebody too.
Yeah.
That's not the reason I left. Like, honestly, by the time we got to that point, I was just like, dude, if you could go out, pay somebody, and just come home and be a decent person, I would stay.
Yeah.
But people even they just can't get their mind around, and it is so hard to articulate. And if you can't articulate it to friends and family, you are definitely not articulating it in the courtroom.
Right. Like coercive control. I mean, like that's the underpinning of everything is coercive control. And it's yet to be recognized in all 50 states. I mean, we have 7 or 8 states that recognize coercive control. And when you're explaining that to somebody, if you're talking about that, like you said, you can't prove mentally that you've been abused. You can prove if you have scars or black eye or, arm in a sling or bruises. I mean, that is tangible, but you go up to a judge and you say, hey, he's doing this or this or this, pitting the kids against me or doing this and this is happening. They look at you and they're like, okay, like, are you the crazy one or where are you at with this? And it's like, that's why it is very important. And that's what we say is like, when you leave, a abusive or toxic or narcissistic, whatever you want to classify your marriage, something is not right, you have to go to documentation and documenting every single phone call, every single thing that was said. If you can go to text and just do texting back and forth, that is time stamped and you have record of what happened. And, you have journals and binders of every message that you have. That way you can refer back to it when it comes time for, going back to court or whatever. So,
No,
that's,
and one of the things that I really stress in my coaching sessions, because if you start to document as you should everything, it's really hard to find it.
yeah,
And so to making sure that you kind of set up a file structure, set up some sort of naming convention to help you, like, here are the topics that this one covers. I'm going to tag it. So if I, in my Google Drive, I can easily search and find everything that has to do with doctor's appointments or travel or, so just kind of realizing that once you're divorced, that's probably not your last time dealing with the court system
no,
either. Like
mm-mm,
they're gonna come after you every time you piss them off, anytime or whatever. Maybe they've lost their job and something's going bad in their life that you have nothing to do with. They're probably gonna take it out on you because still, you will still be enemy number one,
mm-hmm.
probably until the day that they die.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I also believe too, they underestimate too, as like, they want to continue to abuse you through the email or whatever, they don't really care what they say. You're a shitty mom, or you've done nothing, or this is just par for the course. I mean, that's very typical for them to still continue to come after you, but you continue to document, you have everything in writing, you know how you respond. And I think the key too is not responding with emotion anymore. You
Yeah.
take the emotion out of what you're doing. And that is, there's several different methods that they talk about is gray rocking, where you take the emotion out. And there's also another way to respond, and it's the Biff method. So I don't know if you're familiar with that one, but it's BIFF. And it's really about you're just getting to the point and close it up. And there's nothing else, that you need to discuss. And so that's kind of one way that you can deal with high conflict people.
Yes, and the method that I use is Jade, but it's all
Oh,
essentially the
okay.
same thing. Dr. Amini has Don't Go Deep, but
Yeah.
so Jade stands for do not justify, do not argue, do not defend, and do not engage. And honestly, if you don't engage, you're doing the other three.
Yeah.
But it is very much where, and this is where I try to help folks that I work with identify that less. Yes, this is all shitty. They're terrible. They're terrible people, and it is every single thing you feel is valid. But the nice thing is they are predictable. That you can predict this stuff, and you can learn like you file for an increase in child support, they're going to have a tantrum, and that tantrum is going to come in emails because maybe that's how they do it. And they're going to tell you how terrible you are, and they're going to lob all these things. You already know it's coming. So
Mhm.
when you get that nasty email, you can recognize it for what it is. It is not personal. And you have no requirement. Because if they drag that email out in court, a judge is also going to be like, where's your evidence? Where's your proof?
Right.
And so you can just say, I don't need to justify myself. I'm going to feed my kids whatever I'm going to feed my kids. I'm going to dress them however I want, like we have 50-50 or whatever the custody is.
Hmm.
I'm not going to defend. I'm absolutely not going to get dragged into an argument with you. I'm just
Yeah.
going to not engage. And we kind of go through depending on like what it is, here, just one liners you can just copy and paste,
Yeah. Yeah.
and eventually they do taper down. It will never stop. It will never, ever stop. But
Yeah.
it does decrease. But the most important thing is instead of you spending all of this mental energy and strength and getting so incredibly invested and angry, you can just say, like, oh, there it goes again. Here's my copy and paste. Move on with your day. Focus on being your best self for your kids.
Yeah. How do you, the people that you're coaching and stuff like that, how do you get them to recognize that they have been in a unhealthy relationship? Like, because maybe they're coming to you for, hey, I think something's going on in my marriage or whatever. How do you, like, is there, because it's hard to hear, that this is not normal, like when you go to a therapist or when you go to a coach or something like that, and someone starts to recite what was going on in their marriage, and someone looks at you and says, what you were living through is not normal. That's not normal to do that. And it's like, wow, like your head explodes almost, that you're not. So how do you get people to kind of recognize that? Is there a way that you go over like red flags, or is there?
Well, it's actually so I feel like because I generally work with people post divorce when they're in the co-parenting trenches.
Okay.
They've already kind of realized what they were going through when they were married was not okay. And so they are definitely open to the this isn't okay. My main hurdle is the you can't co-parent and trying to almost deprogram people from the judge said that I need to, it's good for us to do joint birthdays and well my friends have this really great divorce and they invite the ex over
Yeah.
for dinner on Sunday nights and just kind of like trying to be like that is awesome that I'm so happy for those people. And my mom and my dad were one of them. They had an amazing divorce. And they did have Sunday dinners together.
Mm.
That is not you. That is not possible. And it is not because of anything that you have done. And it's just really getting folks to recognize it is the other person and you cannot change them. And one of the things that I think really helps folks is really showing it is a pattern. Here are these 8 things that this person is going to do. And they're like, oh, yeah, no, that's exactly what they do. And
Yeah.
it's like, yep. So you fall into this category. Everyone overuses the term narcissism. So I use high conflict, but it is basically all the narcissistic tendencies, fun times. And once people can start to see it as a pattern,
Yeah.
that these are the things that happen. This is, every single time you do X, they do Y. Here's what is the point of these emails? It is nothing to do with the children. It is not helping your kids. The goal is to control you. The goal is to drive you nuts. The goal is to live rent free in your head.
Hmm.
And that is really where it starts to click.
Yeah.
And I will say one of the things, so the way that I kind of structure my coaching is that we really start with like a 2-hour session where we just kind of dive in and figure out where are the issues that you're having. Like, is it setting boundaries that is really hard for you? Is it really not being able to resist that urge to justify yourself in that email? Is it trying just too hard to be in the same place at the same time with your ex because you want to be with your kids? And coming up with a plan. And then the next 6 to 12 sessions, kind of depending on what you choose, is basically learning how to reinforce it. And, going through those emails and just having somebody who is a little bit more detached from the situation being able to say, do you need to respond to that? Is that actually important? And just really, I think for a lot of people, sometimes deep down they know, but then they get that self-doubt. Well, I'm supposed to be co-parenting. I'm not going to look like a good parent if I don't do this. And what are my kids going to think? What is the school going to think? And just really helping people to feel validated that you are doing the right thing by not responding to this email. You are
Hmm.
doing the right thing by saying, no, I don't think we can do a joint birthday party this year.
Right.
And really helping. And by the end of the session, we really want to be focused on, we've set up these boundaries and here's your roadmap to how you're going to continue them. And now you get to focus on the best part, which is being a parent.
Yeah. Yeah. And healing, from all of this too. That's quite a journey. Yeah, I mean, I love how you kind of lay that out for people because one of the things that I think we have to do is really set some really good boundaries for ourselves because we find out that once we leave these relationships that we didn't really have good boundaries. You know, I think that that's a common kind of realization that, boundaries was like, what? What is that? And so reading on how to really establish that it's okay to say no and you don't have to explain anymore or whatever it is. That's part of the healing process and that's part of your self inner work that you have to do. Um, yeah, so how do you think that people go from where they are to start to reclaim like their own power, their own personal power and peace? And even when you're still having conflict with you know, the toxic parent, how do you reclaim, what are your rituals for like reclaiming your inner peace when you've dealt with somebody? Because like you said, maybe having someone read the email and saying, you know what, this is something you don't have to worry about, or he's just trying to do this or whatever. If you don't have that person and you read those emails, there is an activation that happens in your body, right? So you know that like, oh my God, upset about this email, or what does he mean by this, or whatever. And there's an activation that happens. You get yourself into fight or flight in the beginning stages. You're constantly reacting and doing all that kind of stuff. But moving forward, how do you go back to like reclaiming your peace and even when knowing that this person's never going to cooperate or never going to, is there any wisdom there that you've learned?
I mean, it is so hard. I mean, if you have a person And this is, I think, why the coaching is so useful because it does. I mean, you get a person that's going to help you do this. I was lucky enough in my early on relationship. So my partner Leo also has a toxic narcissistic ex, and we help each other even to this day. Like, you know, because we're a little bit more emotionally removed from the situation, we can kind of help the other person identify, even though we know all the rules, we know what we're supposed to be doing. It
Mhm.
is really helpful to just have another person going like,
Yeah.
you really need to respond to that. Like, like let's kind of talk about it.
Yeah.
But so many people, I mean, and it's really hard to try to find somebody who can offer that support in your network because I feel, and a lot of the people that I talk to, the people who love and support them don't understand what they need. And so it's almost like, you'll call your mom to talk about, oh my gosh, my ex is doing this and I'm so frustrated. And then they get so angry at your ex that all of a sudden you're dealing with their emotional reaction as well as your own. And
Yeah.
there's no support there.
Hmm.
Um, so I honestly, and this is going to sound insane, chat GPT.
Oh, it's a
Like,
lifesaver, isn't it? You throw that
I
stuff
mean,
in there and it comes out. It's like, wow.
yeah, like I just copy and paste an email and just say, analyze this for
Yeah.
me. You don't even have to give it anything else.
Yeah.
And it will say like, here are the 1,000,010 things wrong with this email. And that if you just need that little validation, it's a good easy trick. I will say do not use ChatGPT for a lawyer. Do not use it to replace, real legal advice because it will make shit up. As someone who could not afford a lawyer at the end of the divorce, I learned that.
Yeah.
But it is definitely if you need that like just validation, because so many of us, it is like rebuilding the sense of security and power and just knowledge that what you feel is actually true is a journey. And you are going to need that extra validation as you move towards that. And
Yeah.
so,
Well,
yeah,
it's incredibly powerful because you can put the email in there and it'll say, this is gatekeeping, this is parental alienation tactics, this is blah blah blah. And you're like, okay, this is what I've been saying, like the whole time.
yeah,
This is what's been going on. And then, you can also say craft a response and then you respond, and so it's like it's taken the emotion out of things and it allows you to co-parent so much better without feeling like you're working yourself up. Like I just, I think it's a wonderful little, little thing that you want to add into your backpack of things to deal with. You just throw it in and it responds and then you're out of it. You just don't even have to deal with it. Um,
100%.
Yeah, yeah. So looking back, to your journey, what is one thing that you wish that you would have known earlier? Like, is there anything that, you know, like one of the things that I hear often a lot is when I'm talking to women is that these alienating or, you know, narcissistic tactics have been happening the entire relationship. It didn't just start, post separation, whatever. And and it's almost like Sleeping Beauty waking up from the long sleep, the nap, the whatever, the fog is lifted and you see things for what they are instead of what you had wished that they would be. And so, is there anything that looking back, that you would have been able to save or to say, you know what, this just wasn't right, or I wish I would have left then, or, I mean, I guess we all have our regrets and things like that that we live with, and it's part of our journey. But is there anything that kind of sticks out to you?
I mean, I say this all the time. I wish I would have started planning to leave the day after I got pregnant with my youngest.
Mhm.
But I think too, I was in denial for a long part of my journey where, they would, Dr. Ramani had this really great video that I still watch talking about all of the things you can expect when you leave a narcissist. And I was like, yeah, yeah, 3, 4, and 5 will happen, but not 2 and 1. Like those aren't going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And I wish I had prepared better. I wish I had not trusted. Because oh man, our divorce, the first few months of it, you would have thought we were out of a fairy tale. We were living in the same house. We were writing the divorce decree ourselves. Everything was just hunky dory. Little did I know that he had, because we were living in the same house, he had listening equipment in the basement, was listening to my therapist and my lawyer conversations. He was planning all this stuff. He was siphoning money off. Like, I wish I had just known, again, the day after I got pregnant with my son, I'm going to leave. I'm going to start planning. And I know, like, once you're at this stage where you need to leave, nobody should tell you stay another year so you can financially plan. Get out. It is not worth it. But if I
Mhm.
knew what I knew now, I would have protected some assets a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I would not have wasted so much time arguing over the small stuff, because I think that this is for anyone going through a divorce.
Hmm.
You get emotionally attached to certain things. Um, the marital home is just such a huge one for folks, and just realizing you can be a good parent in a different house. It's okay. That being said, I ended up keeping my marital home, so I feel
Yeah.
very hypocritical saying that, but if I
Yeah.
very easily could have lost it post divorce. But then also just, you will be okay. I mean,
Mhm.
almost everybody ends up with 50% custody, and that is such a huge barrier to people leaving, because they cannot imagine their life outside of being able to see their kids every day. And I mean, I won't lie, there was at least a year for me where I was just like, no, because I want to see my kids every day. I can protect them better when I'm with them every day than I can if I let him do whatever he's going to say to the kids 50% of the time. And the huge thing for me was realizing, I looked at my daughter, and at this time I was estranged from my mom, and I knew my mom was watching me be emotionally abused. And then I just thought, oh my God, I could not imagine the pain my mom is going through watching me. I could not imagine seeing my daughter think and do the exact same thing. And realizing that I am such a better parent outside of this relationship, that and I talk about this a lot on my channel. It's like, we need to normalize leaving for the kids,
Hmm.
because I mean, fine, I might have been able to, like, catch a couple of things he might have been telling them, but I would also be telling them every single day through my actions, it is acceptable for somebody to treat you like this.
Right. I think there is one of my favorite authors, Glennon Doyle. She had this moment in her marriage where she looked at her daughter and she said, am I staying for my daughter? Would I want this for my daughter? Would I want this type of marriage for my daughter? And if the answer is no, I mean, you know what to do. I mean, it's clear. And and you hope that you do the right thing for your, not every situation, certainly turns out to being in a divorce situation 50-50. Um, there are so many things that go into play in that. And there are ways of, with parental alienation, there's all kinds of different stuff that happens with those dynamics in the courts. And as you know, family court is not at all like set up to be what it's I don't want to get down on family court, and that's not really what, where my focus is. But I think that we have to really look at a lot of different things. And, sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, and it's a very hard road to walk, if you don't get that 50-50 custody. And a lot of parents, I think have that self-doubt of, was I a good parent? what could I have done differently? Could I have changed something differently? And it's devastating when you're not with your children, bottom line, and there's nothing anybody can say or do that will take away that. And I think I'm in a group, with a lot of women that don't see their children because of specifically, their children being weaponized against them in a parental alienation type situation. And hearing, that they haven't spoken to their children in 15 years or 10 years or 5 years or whatever it is. And I'm thinking, that's just horrific, right? Like, that is so awful to not be a part of your child's life, and that it has gotten to a point so so devastating and so toxic in that marriage that bad mouthing was going on, or degrading the mother of your children or the father of your children, that that child is turning away from the safest person, right? Or the person who raised them. And this happens time and time again, in these types of situations. And it's, I don't know, just hearing all of these stories and being a part of different conversations and stuff like that, you see how, you know, these toxic marriages can go off the rails. And, no one ever really prepares you for that. When you think about, like, you said after your youngest child, you should have left and all this, and, um, I think it's so hard to, like, get that in your mind that this is what you have to do. You've got to prepare yourself to leave. And because this marriage is no longer viable, but you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how it's all going to, like, the house of cards is going to blow up and you don't know where you're going to land. And it's a scary part in the very beginning stages, because I think a lot of us use our attorneys as therapists. I know that, my attorney sure got called a lot, and emails were sent and everything to her. And she, was very friendly and great and talked to me and everything. But also, I realized that my retainer was going down, down, down. And hey, by the way, you need to put a couple more $1,000 in your retainer, and you've got to, take care of this. But had I had someone like you who would have been of service, of saying, hey, I'm over here, while you're working with your attorney to get you through the legal part of things, I'm over here and can be a service to help you walk through what to expect. I think that's so important, because you have no idea what to expect. You don't know, like I said earlier, the game that you're playing. You're confused and you're walking through life like, what the hell just happened to me? My world just kind of blew up. And I don't know, so many women talk about facing those early stages. And is there anything that, you can say as far as how you can help people in those beginning stages for your coaching and stuff?
No, and I will say a very large chunk of my clients actually come as referrals from
Oh,
law
good.
firms,
Good.
because the lawyers have recognized they don't want to do this is
Yeah.
not where they want to be, but they want their clients writing fewer emails
Oh,
and
that's
not,
wonderful.
so it's actually been really, really great, because to have people in the legal profession recognize that this is something that is needed.
Hmm.
And I know, and it's so hard, because like when you're looking at the cost and you're like, oh, well, it'll be a couple $1,000s to like do the MSA and then, whatever, and then we'll be done. No, like, it is so incredibly, like, financially draining, that if you can at the beginning of the process really arm yourself with a team. And I think there are three main people you can have on your team. One is a therapist. Figure out what, and that internal work of working on yourself. Why did I think that this was okay? How can I kind of work on my internal healing?
Hmm.
Second, of course, you're a lawyer.
Yeah.
But third is me, is the coach, is kind of the I'm not going to help you figure out why in your inner child work and all that stuff. Like that is a licensed professional who's going to help you do that. I want to give you the tools that you need to move forward. What can you expect from this individual? How can you respond to these emails? How can you document well? Because I mean, and I'm sure you know this, right? Like the
Mhm.
lawyers tell you to document, and you think you're paying this person to do the work for you, and then they're like, hey, we need about 100,000 documents from you. You need to do it like this. And oh, by the way, if you can think of anything you're missing, please pull it in. You
Mhm.
realize, oh my gosh, I wanted an honorary law degree when I was done with my
Right.
degree.
Yeah,
It's like,
it's amazing that how good you become. Like my dad was joking around with me. He's like, you ought to go into law school. And I'm like, you know what? I could do that, because you become so good at documenting and you're like, oh, this happened at 4 o'clock on blah, blah, blah. And this was the context and this is, and you become just, I have binders and binders of stuff, and it's like, it is amazing. You should be recognized as being some sort of paralegal or something at the end of it.
100%. I mean, at the end of this, I was writing court because I couldn't pay my attorney. So I was
Mm,
just like, hey, like I'm gonna identify the things that I can do. And
yeah.
I was writing court orders, I was filing motions, like I was doing their work. And basically they were just that they were there on paper. So my ex didn't think I was completely and totally vulnerable, which
Yeah.
by the way, he was also an attorney by trade. So I was divorcing an attorney. That was fun.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So they knew that, he knew that. Yeah. Gosh.
Yeah. And that's a huge thing to look out for too, is because we talk a lot about post separation abuse in terms of like the emails and everything, but they also use the court system. Like the legal abuse is insane.
Yeah.
And how and mine was, a professional, but I mean, so many of the people I talk to, they I don't know how they find out how to do this, but they absolutely use legal and as well as social services. Like the amount I have this client who, I mean, it is heartbreaking. He's a dad, and the mom keeps the false allegations. And she, to the point where the judge said, like, if you file another one of these allegations, you will lose custody. And then
Hmm.
she just happened to mention it to somebody at school who's a mandatory reporter, and it gets all over again. I mean, and it is just, and this poor child,
Yeah.
like, she's just, never in it. She doesn't even know which home she's going to go to. She has to go to a third home whenever these court orders are, being investigated. And it's just,
It's like
it's
traumatizing. It's like,
awful.
and I think that there's a common pathology with these abusers or narcissist or toxic exes or sadistic exes or whatever you want to say. There seems to be a common pathology that they all kind of do, and it's so sad because the kids become the collateral damage. And like you never want that for your kids. You wanted them to be, you know, loved and not have to deal with the chaos that comes with this. Like, I think so many of us have these rose-colored glasses of like, oh, we're just going to be able to get a good divorce and move on and be able to help each other and, be co-parents and, but it's never like that. I mean, very rarely do you ever get that. So it's like, you have to really know that's a kind of a fantasy. You're living in a fantasy world if you believe that that's really going to happen. Like Christmases are going to be together and we're going to share this and we're going to share that. No, it's not going to happen like that. And I
No,
think that,
and
that
if
you
you
have to be
do,
honest.
and if you do get like sucked into sharing holidays,
Uh-huh.
it is going to be awful. It is going to be awful for you, and it is going to be awful for your children, because even if you're smiling and gritting your teeth, they can feel it.
Yeah.
They know. It is not like let them be happy at the other parent's house, even if that other parent is a piece of shit, and then do your separate thing. Like,
Yeah.
I think so many people try to force the fantasy,
Hmm.
and don't recognize the emotional toll it's taking on them and the kids.
Right.
Unless you are that beautiful 1%, which if you're
Mhm.
listening to this podcast, you're not. Like if
Yeah.
you found this podcast, if you found my TikTok, like you are not. Like
Mhm.
it's just not there. And it sucks because, um, but like my lawyer always said, there's a reason you're getting divorced and this is it.
Mhm. Yeah.
If they were that easy to get along with, you probably would be a happier person.
Right. Right. Exactly. So as we kind of wrap up our conversation, what has your healing journey kind of been like?
I mean, it has been amazing. And I always say that the worst days of the divorce were better than the marriage, better than the
Mhm.
best day, because I was lucky enough to have done a lot of the understanding and the healing before I left. It was like about a year of me just understanding who this person was, what everything was going, and really kind of working on myself, that once I left, and especially once we started living in two houses, just that freedom and that lightness, and learning, every day. And I say it is still something that we have to work on every single day.
Mhm.
It grows, and that, I remember me like 4 or 5 weeks after we decided to separate, going like, oh my god, I haven't been this happy in ever. And then like 3 months later, I was like, oh my God, I've never been this happy. And it just kind of continued to grow. And then you learn to take these moments with yourself or with your kids and just go, I could never have done that in the marriage. And one of my biggest things, that just happened with both of my kids actually, is we've been trying to talk about the idea of gaslighting, and obviously not parental alienating a parent.
Mhm.
But knowing that this is something that they're probably it's going to happen. And um, we've been reading the book, The Sky is Red. We, have been talking a lot about, like, if somebody says, you hit your brother, but you didn't hit your brother, you don't have to convince your brother, like, the truth. We're going to just focus on the truth. And seeing my kids now talk about the sky is red. Um, and they kind of starting to get this idea that people will lie, but I know my truth. And that is something I never would have taught my kids. And they're going to grow up understanding what gaslighting is, unlike you and me,
Yeah.
right? We
Right.
had no idea. It was happening to us all the time. And just taking, um, a lot of solace in this. Like, I took the steps, and thank God I did it when my kids were so young.
Mm.
Because my partner's kids are older, and we are having a whole different ball game with
Yes.
that.
Yeah,
Um,
I often wonder, is it easier to leave when your children are smaller, or is it easier to leave when your children are in their teens? And because, like there's a host of other situations that happen, it's I don't know.
I
The jury's still out on that one, I guess.
I will say, because I think a lot of people say, like, oh, I'll stay until their X age. No, like, my kids were 2 and 4,
Mm.
and they didn't really understand divorce. They didn't really understand marriage. Like, when I started dating, they didn't have a lot of feelings about it, because they were like, okay, cool, mommy's got a friend. Like, introducing my partner to the kids went so amazingly smooth. They just kind of grew up thinking, like, okay, mommy and daddy have two houses, and the parental alienation really hadn't started. And I am able to get in there,
Before
and,
it does
they
happen.
need their mom. They love their mom. Like,
Mhm.
they can't be bought with
Yeah.
toys and electronics right now, because they still know they need that emotional love and safety. And so I am so grateful. I watch my partner, and I have so many clients with older kids. Like, they have a lot of predetermined preconceptions. It is a lot easier for them to understand. If your ex is saying, oh, mommy or daddy cheated, they're gonna hate you.
Hmm.
My kids wouldn't understand what that meant.
Hmm.
So, like, the ability to do the parental alienation, and especially if you're not aware that it's happening, or it can't be that bad, or you're trying so hard to be a good co-parent, you're just talking up how great the other parent is, and then the other parent's telling you your kids what a piece of shit you are, and you're not realizing that you're actually contributing. Like I would say a million and 10 times, like the younger your kids are, the better.
Mm.
But that's from my personal experience.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
That's good to know. That's good to know. So if you're talking to someone, let's just pretend as our last as we're wrapping up, but if you're talking to someone who feels defeated today and they're completely overwhelmed by their situation, and what would you say are like the first steps?
I think the first steps is first acknowledging this is awful, and it is okay for you to feel like absolute shit, and it is not fair.
Mm.
100%. But you've probably been through harder days. Like the day and helping folks remember, like you've already done the hard things. You chose to leave. That was huge and scary, and you know, and no matter where you end up going, if you lose your house, if you are completely and totally financially broke, like you can still be a good parent. You can still be a happy parent and find love and peace. And here are some tools to do it. And we just kind of just really slowly, what's the first step? Don't think about 10 years down the road. Let's think about the first step that we can do to make just a little bit of progress. And you are not alone. There's so many people out there that are living the same thing. And the wonderful thing about your podcast and the books that are coming out is that we're finally fucking starting to talk about it.
Right.
Because, I mean, without hearing other people's stories, you think that you are alone and you must be crazy and this person must be better than you think they are and it can't be that bad. It
Hmm.
is.
Hmm.
It's awful. The system is broken, but you can learn how to work around the system and still be a happy person and a good parent.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so important to understand because I think that there is destruction comes construction. You destroy, it's destroyed. It's completely gone. Fire has been set, scorched earth kind of thing. And so you get to rebuild life and you get to put the good things in life that you want and the healthy, the safe, the things that make you feel good again. And that light in you does return. And I think that that's always you know, good to hear that, it's the most brokenness that you will feel, but you will get to be able to rebuild yourself back. So, where do our listeners find you in your coaching?
So you can always find me at unfuckyourcoparenting.com. And I'm on TikTok and Instagram also under the same handle, Unfuck Your Coparenting, because that is what we are trying to do.
Yes, yes, definitely. So I just want to thank you so much for taking the time out today to talk with us on Stronger Roots and get your message out. And I'm so sorry for your pain and we keep doing these podcasts and things like that. And I'm always amazed by the resilience that so many women are like coming, like they're stepping into their power and they're shining and they're growing and they feel so confident within themselves. And, I see it in you and I hear it in your voice and I see that you've taken your pain. And I keep saying this all the time, taking your pain and turning it into your purpose, right now. And that feels so incredibly awesome to witness and just continue to shine a light on the subject, keep talking about it. I love that what you're doing and you're helping others. And I feel like there's always that obligation once you go through something that's so devastating that you have an obligation to turn around and help the next woman behind you, you know? And if we continue to remember that, I think we're going to be all right. So I just want to thank you so much for your time, your effort, your energy for being here. And I hope that one day you'll come back to our show.
No, absolutely. And I could say the absolute same thing about you and Stronger Roots and this podcast. So thank you. And yeah, let's just keep getting the message out there so folks know that they're not alone.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.